council tax on expensive homes, but most of the money comes from the not-so-rich. The controversial issue of council tax on high-value properties. The Financial Times has reported that Rachel Reeves is planning a budget tax raid on the owners of expensive homes, expected to raise around £4 billion. But here's the catch. Less than 20% of that revenue comes from homes in the top council tax band, while roughly 80% comes from the much larger group of homes in the second highest band. This raises the question, can we achieve the same result in a fairer way? How much is raised? And from whom? Council tax is based on 1991 property values, divided into 8 bands from A to H. Band H is the highest, roughly homes now worth over £1.5 million, and Band G the next, typically £750,000 to £1.5 million. Doubling council tax for Band G and Band H would raise about £4 billion, but more than 3/4 of that would come from Band G households. In practice, that means families in £750,000 to £1.5 million homes would see their council tax double, an average rise of around £4,000. Can we achieve the same result in a fairer way? It seems intuitive that we could raise more money by leaving Band G alone, and instead adding new bands at the top. However, you have to apply an unrealistically high multiplier to these bands to even approach the revenues achieved by a simple doubling of Band G and Band H council tax. This is not a sensible proposal. What if we try a mansion tax? We can achieve a fairer result if, instead of a multiplier, we apply a mansion tax to all the properties in Band H, i.e., a percent of property value within the bands. That has a much reduced impact in those at the bottom of the band, say £1.5 million to £3 million properties, and a much higher impact at the top end. However, a percentage tax fails to raise as much as a simple doubling of Band G and Band H council tax unless we apply rates approaching and exceeding 2%. Rates this high would be unwise and would be capitalized into property values, causing a 20% plus one-off fall in high-end property values. The fairness problem. Our view is that it is absolutely fair and right to create new council tax bands at the top end and apply higher rates to them, provided we don't set the rates so high that we see very significant declines in property value. However, it does not seem fair to greatly increase council tax for people in Band G. People living in Band G properties will often be comfortably off, but are certainly not the super wealthy. In many cases, they will have experienced significant tax increases over the previous 10 years. It seems particularly unfair if any doubling will be cumulative on the second home premium, which doubles and in Wales, triples the cost of council tax for people with a second home. A 600% premium would be unjust, and the impact on house prices would be so severe as to almost amount to confiscation. Thought-provoking questions. Why is it that most of the tax increases of the last 10 years have been on reasonably high earners and not on the super-rich? The obvious answer is the correct one. It's much easier to raise large amounts of money from them. There is no way to raise £4 billion from the super-rich that's anything like as easy as doubling council tax on moderately high-value properties. However, there are relatively simple tax reforms that would raise significant sums from the very wealthy, such as reforming capital gains tax, making the previously announced inheritance tax changes more effective, or a wholesale reform of land taxation.